Okay, it's time to start, 6:31. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Jim.
Good evening. Hello, Mayor.
Okay, this is the city of Fairway, Kansas. It is our city council meeting for Monday, August 8th, 2022. It is 6:31 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I have one announcement. We will be removing one of the executive sessions from the agenda, so we will only have one this evening. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nathan, do we have individuals on Zoom this evening in the audience? Pardon? Oh. Okay. And we have no audience here at City Hall. All right, the monthly reports of the standing committees. Consolidated Fire District Number 2. The fire chief is not here this evening, so we will allow his report to stand as submitted. Next is the Committee of the Whole, Admin and Finance. Nathan?
Yeah, just in full disclosure, I was out of the office last week, so Kim prepared these, and I've not had a chance to thoroughly review them. But I would say the Finance and Administration Committee did not meet in July, and you can see all of the other categories that are under administration. Nothing was out of line according to what I've been told by staff. Just one correction on the upcoming meeting notices. There were question marks for the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. That is Wednesday, August 31st at 6:30 p.m. And that is it for administration, unless there are any questions.
Any questions for Nathan? Yeah, Jenna?
Jenna, Ward 4. I noticed that Stretch Lab is coming to town, and they're actually opening like this week, I saw.
So they started at the end of July with sort of a tent out in the parking lot, and so they did obtain a couple of transient merchant licenses just because they were not operating within a structure. They have since applied for their occupational permit. They are hoping to be open in September was the last I heard.
Okay, cool. And the Stretch Lab, it's a new, they stretch you out place. I haven't been, but on the strip. So I was glad to see another business was coming to Fairway.
Yeah, it's. One of the staff said that as they drove by yesterday or last week, somebody was out in the parking lot in a pretzel. So apparently, if you need to get stretched, that's the place to go. Yeah.
And I have one more an actual question. I saw that there was a solar permit that had got in, and I haven't watched the Planning Commission meetings. How did that go with our new what we passed a few months ago?
I didn't. I wasn't at the meeting, but I've not heard anything negative about the experience.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Nathan? Okay. Police, Chief?
Thanks. I'm going to let my report stand, but I'd like to talk about crime. Repeatedly, you guys have heard me say, crime's going up, crime's going up, crime's going up. We are experiencing a lot of property crime for Fairway at this where we're at in the world right now. Over the weekend, there were 3 stolen autos, and we estimate probably around 20 cars were burglarized, but no one, just maybe 1 or 2, I think, wanted to make a report. every single one of those vehicles, to include those stolen autos, were unlocked, and the stolen autos had the keys in them. Our message has not changed. I was asked by a media source today what my message is, and I'm on repeat. I've sent things out. You guys hear me say it all the time. Lock your stuff, lock your stuff, lock your stuff. I'll give you a story over the weekend, too, because I think some of these stories kind of help explain where we're at. So an officer's cruising around this weekend while all this stuff is going on, or just prior to it, and he sees an open garage door, and he goes up and knocks on the door. The resident comes to the door, obviously woke him up, said, "Hey, your garage door's open." They're like, "Oh, yeah, thanks." They shut the garage door. That's all great. The officer goes on. Well, boom, later on in the night, all this other stuff's going on. He's chasing these burglars and car thieves around. And I'll define those a little bit more here in a minute. But do you know that house that he went and knocked on the door where the garage door was open, after he left and after they shut the garage door, he didn't go up and check the car doors. He just saw that the garage door was open. They burglarized those vehicles in the driveway because they were unlocked. So, I mean, it's not just, we have to rely on the community to lock things up. People have been asking, because in the neighborhoods, and you guys have heard talk, what can we do, what can we do, what can we do? I'm getting a lot of these calls. What can we do? And the biggest thing is lock your doors. Okay. The suspects over the weekend. We get to see them because now there's a lot of cameras on homes and things like that. And so we're watching, and we watch them see our patrols, and what they're doing is they're entering on foot. There were 3 individuals on foot. They look like they could have been teens, 20s, males. They're walking along the house lines, and I'm not meaning to scare anybody, but this is reality. They're walking along the house lines. When they see headlights, and I know they saw headlights of some of our cars, some of our patrols, what they're doing is they're running up by the houses and running behind the houses. I watched it on video. They're not trying to get into the houses. They're just avoiding the lights and the engines of the cars. So that makes it very difficult for us, obviously, when we're moving through the neighborhoods in vehicles to locate these guys, especially because they're moving in on foot. That being said, we have a bunch of stuff in motion now. We are prepared to combat this, and we're getting ready to throw resources with manpower and outside of the box thinking. From our law enforcement standpoint, we're going to put bikes out. There's going to be guys on bikes out on patrol at night. They may be in plain clothes, no lights on the bikes. They may be in uniforms with lights on the bikes. But we are going to be out there too. If these guys are going to be out on foot and they're going to be ducking us in the cars, we're going to be out there in the shadows waiting for them as well. And I'm not giving away patrol tactics, because either they can go to jail or go away. I hope they're listening. So that's where we're at. I don't mean to scare anyone or anything like that, but it's affecting us as a city right now. And we're being targeted because we're leaving everything wide open. And of course I wouldn't be surprised if they come back and go through the same cars again to see if it'll start. You just open the door and push the button. If it starts, you leave. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. We're also going to do a different type of media push as well, not just with what we're doing, because no one's listening, apparently. So I have to rely on you guys, and then I'm also considering doing a mailer or something like that, even though it's going to cost money, but I'm going to put something in everybody's hand, and I want a unified message from all of us, from the community, from the police, from the council, and everybody else. Like, this is our message about locking your stuff up. So that's what we're doing.
I would just add to that, and Abby looked back in the January newsletter of this year, in the March newsletter of this year, as well as content-specific emails, all have gone out to the city in the last 7 months saying, please lock your doors, please don't leave valuables in your car. So we've hit that both in our paper newsletters as well as through our digital media.
Facebook.
Facebook, and it's for some reason it's just not resonating with folks to make sure. And I'm sure, to be fair, a lot of times it's probably they had no idea that they accidentally left it unlocked, and accidents are going to happen. But as Chief said, as long as we continue to keep the buffet open, people are going to come feed. So we need the residents' help to get the doors locked, garage doors closed, that sort of thing.
I received one email and one phone call over the weekend, so please help us get the message out. I mean, we're trying, but I can hear the frustration in your voice.
I don't like
Chief.
bad guys.
Neither do I.
Got a real problem with that. So,
All right, any questions
Yeah,
on
I
the
just
chief's
had a-
report?
On the
Yeah,
car-
David, go
Chief,
ahead.
in terms of your open garage door comment made me think, have we had any incidents of, like, someone's mowing the yard in the backyard, and I leave my garage door open when I mow the yard, and has anyone gone in that way? And my other
no, but
question.
you know that happens. I mean, it happens. It's just not right now with this trend. What's happening with this trend, though, and I guess I failed to mention, is not only the garage doors that are up, but if your car is unlocked and you have your garage door in there and they push the button and the door goes up.
That was my other question.
Yeah, I mean,
was,
they got in.
Are they using
They've taken a vehicle. They've taken vehicles out of garages that way because people leave their keys right inside or in the cars in the garages. So if your car's unlocked, you also have access to your home and to all of your paperwork that's in your car and whatever else is in there. So that's all out there too. I mean, we've got a really cool graph that I had Jamie make that has, hey, if you leave your car unlocked, and it points to everything. That was in one of our focus letters. So
That's obvious. I was just wondering if that had actually happened.
oh, it happens.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
Thank
of course. But not right now, not exactly that, but there's a likelihood of it. I also need to mention one more thing because we haven't just had auto burgs. We've had some residential burglaries. And we've actually had really good success. We have suspects. We've taken people into custody, and different people. And we've also followed up, done interviews, got confessions, all that. So most of the residential stuff is wrapping itself up. That's dangerous, and so are those auto burgs. Everything that I'm talking about is dangerous. It boils over into everyone's safety, especially if you're opening the door to a home. So, but that's where we're at on those. I want everybody to know that. So,
Thank you, Chief. And it's not just Fairway, because I've been asked that question too. Was it just Fairway? No. Yeah, the metro area. I think for the surrounding cities, I think that it was going on in the surrounding, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, it was going around on in the surrounding cities, and it just now is hitting Fairway. Now, meaning within the last month.
Yeah, with the frequency.
Yes, frequency.
The last month and a half, the frequency has gone through the roof.
Any other questions for the Chief? Okay, thank you. Public Works, Bill? Bill, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
I'm sorry, that took a little longer than expected. My mouse was asleep and didn't want to wake up. Thanks, everyone. I will let my report stand as submitted. One thing I do want to highlight is staff has been working diligently the last couple of months ahead of our next reaccreditation visit, which will be in October. Currently, we are down to about 12% of our practices left that we have to go back through and re-verify that all the information in it is correct. And kudos to City Administrator Nogelmeyer for loaning us Abby to help proofread all of our hard work and make sure we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. And I will be subject to any questions that you guys may have.
Any questions for Bill? David?
Bill, I did have one question. I see some work going on Howe and Glenfield. Where did we end up on our mill and overlay in terms of what streets are going to be able to be done this year and which are not?
That work is all being done by Water One's contractors. That is work that they directly affected, and that is not our contract. But as to answer your question, Howe and Glenfield are going to be milled and overlaid, and our spot curb repair that was outside of Water One scope will be fixed.
I think if I remember correctly, Bill and Nathan were going to have that conversation, and Nathan's been out on vacation, so
Yeah, I know.
that hasn't happened yet.
And we did the only street we removed was Brook Ridge, and then the little stub of Sheridan from the bridge to Shawnee Mission Parkway.
Oh, okay.
We've added that to 2023's capital improvement plan.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would just
John?
add
Oh,
to
go
that,
ahead,
right
Nathan.
now, we just took Brookridge and Sheridan and we added it to next year in hopes that prices will stabilize, maybe even come down a little bit. But if push comes to shove, we may have to look at moving something that was originally scheduled for 23 to 24, because we don't want to keep pushing Brookridge.
Correct.
So right now, we have it all placed in 2024, or 2023, but that's putting us over $1 million just in mill and overlay for 2023.
I would also like to state that when Nathan and I met to make that discussion, we also had a hard look at our budgetary numbers that we were using for capital improvement with the most recent bid and adjusted those accordingly. And we'll look at it from a year-to-year basis with whatever our bids come back as.
And, you know, I was thinking, as I was reading the council minutes in the packet yesterday, when that budget was put together, that would have been a year ago.
18 months.
18 months ago that we put that budget together, just like now we're putting 18 months, we're putting a budget together for 2023. And I know there are individuals that were, it's unbelievable what the cost is of that, the restroom at Peterson Park, what the concrete is doing, but 18 months ago, who knew that we'd be in the position that we're in? So that's one of the fallacies in the timeline that we have to follow that's required by the state to get the budget done and to have everything published accordingly. It's the crystal ball just doesn't always work.
Mayor, I've always said that I have to look into a crystal ball more than most, guesstimating on construction prices, salt prices, how much it's going to snow, how little it's going to snow. This was the first year that I was ever caught flat-footed. I've never seen things change so much as they did in a year and a half. We had really good prices in 2020, really good prices in 2021, and then things went up 400% in a year. That I've never seen that before.
John Allen, go ahead.
Bill, I know you got the results back from the street survey, and you were going to start looking at those and seeing what came of that. One, have you had any chance to kind of put together where our streets are based on that survey? And then how did you determine Sheridan and Brook Ridge would be the one that would get pushed?
I'll answer the first question first. Yes, we got the report back. I've looked it over and trying to set up a Public Works Committee meeting. I emailed you last week, still waiting on your reply on that one so we can get that scheduled. And we'll discuss that at that time. The reason Sheridan and Brook Ridge was removed, it seemed they were the best of the worst, if that makes sense. And specifically, Howe and Glenfield had to be done. We allowed Water One to do work on that ahead of what we assumed would be our mill and overlay. And there's significant failed storm sewer work that needs to be done. If you know, there's grates in the street. David can attest. There's the storm boxes, the grates are in the streets, and you know, not optimum for location. Everything should have a curb return and not have a grate in the street that cars run over, snow plows run over, trash trucks run over, and what have you. So those two were 1A and 1B, and then we went from there. And then, you know, proximity, we easily could have added that little stub of Sheridan, but it didn't make sense to do that without doing the rest of the bridge as well.
Any other questions for Bill? Okay, Parks and Rec, Bryce?
How we doing? I will let my report stand as submitted. We are in our first day of school hours, so we're not open Monday through Thursdays. We'll open on Fridays from 4 to 8, and then open on Saturdays as normal, noon to 8 through Labor Day right now. So it was a good weekend. It was a nice hot weekend, and hopefully we have a few more of those to finish up the season.
Bryce, the numbers through July are outstanding. Congratulations and thank you. Please pass that along to Vicki and Jackson, if you would.
Absolutely.
I know you guys have worked very, very hard, and last week was a tough week.
Yeah.
Any questions for Bryce? David?
Bryce, not really a question. I just wanted to thank you for following up on our request to investigate the pricing on the potential bathroom, phase 1, whatever it is. Still seems like a whole lot of money, but I guess everything is just costing more now. But I appreciate your looking into that for us. And
yeah, my hope was to have a contract ready for Mayor to sign by today. The contract still being worked out, the language in there, so we can retain ownership of those plans once we get done with phase 1.
Any other questions for Bryce? Okay, thanks, Bryce.
Yep.
All right, the monthly reports of the special committees. Tree Board, Nathan?
And just note that the annual tree plan is a part of the consent agenda.
Got it. Okay, I'm assuming our audience remains the same? Okay. Then I will dispense with calling the public comment for our consent agenda items. Consent agenda items are determined to be routine enough to be acted on in a single motion. However, this does not preclude discussion. If a council member requests, an item may be removed from the consent agenda for further consideration in a separate motion. On the consent agenda are 4 items. A, approve minutes of the previous regular and special city council meetings. B, approve claims and appropriations, ordinance number 1766, July 2022. C, approve the annual tree plan. And D, approve the leaf collection agreement with Benjamin Lawn and Landscape. Is there anyone on the council who would like to remove an item for separate consideration?
I don't want to remove, but I had 2 questions.
Okay.
On the consent agenda items. For the leaf collection, I didn't know if every year we rotated the order of the wards, because I got a complaint about that Ward 4 was too late last year, so I just didn't know if we made an effort to do that.
I can tell you that they do, because Ward 1 was early last year, and it's now late.
Okay,
So
very
ours is with the Homes Association, so it's different with each ward.
Okay.
So I can't speak to the other wards, but can you tell if the dates are the same?
I can't tell. I didn't
Okay.
know. I asked, and I didn't get a response, so I was hopeful that was the case.
I can maybe add, it does change because a couple of years ago was too early.
Okay.
And so our ward folks were not happy about the timing of too early. It's just, it's tough.
Yeah, and it is tough. And I think, I mean, Benjamin does a great job for the city, and we get complaints from different wards. I'm
sure we do.
Yes. So I think he's rotating it as best he can.
Very good. That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
I would personally like to file a grievance against the leaves for falling, regardless of time frame.
Duly noted.
Okay.
Jason, duly noted. Huh.
I second that.
Yeah, I was going to second that too. Okay, is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as shown on our main agenda. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to new business. Item A, consider accepting the 2021 audit. Nathan, I'll turn it over to you.
I'm going to pull up the draft audit here, and I'm just going to turn things over to our auditor, Jim Schultz.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll just take a few minutes to kind of walk through the document. You know, we're pushing 50 pages there, but don't need to go over every single one of them. As many of you have heard before, I usually always start my presentation explaining the audit process a little bit, and mostly to bring out the fact that we don't look at 100% of everything, but what we do look at are the more significant things you did, attempt to make sure they are correct, focus on those, look at the current year compared to the prior year to see what may have changed and if there's some underlying reason or cause. And that certainly was the case this year, which we'll get to in a few minutes. And then we design our accounting tests to address those. You know, our audit's kind of now moved to more of a risk-based approach. You know, where are the risks that something could be wrong in the financial statements in a material fashion? And then we also look at your internal controls, your checks and balances, to see if they are in place and if designed effectively and in place. We don't audit your internal control. That's a higher level. But we do look at those closely, and we've always generally found them to be in good. You have good internal controls, again, from the standpoint that you have appropriate levels of approval. Things are being reviewed in multiple fashions, and making sure that the accounting records are accurate. So, our auditor's report, it has grown substantially. I'll touch on that in a moment, but the most important thing is, in our world, we refer to it as an unmodified opinion. That means we're taking no exceptions to the accounting and reporting presentation in the audit document itself for the city's amounts and disclosures. Again, it's our highest level of assurance, and maybe that's the most important point to make. So, I mentioned it has expanded greatly. Our reporting standards setting body decided we need to, and really kind of touch on some of the things I just did here in my usual lead-in presentation in the bullet points on the second page, and mentioning there explicitly, these are all new. It's always been there. We're just now making it more visible, I guess. You know, we have to use judgment. We do look at the risks. You know, we focus our audit work and our key audit time on the risks. We do look at internal control. Those also have an impact on how you address your risks and so forth, and make sure the accounting policies are appropriate and in accordance with the accounting principles that are required for those. And then the one I've always found kind of interesting, and I've been having to point out to everybody, you'll see there's a mention in there about we have to also conclude that you'll have the ability to continue as a going concern. That's always been thought of more as a business-like concept, but it's always been in our accounting and auditing literature. It extends to governments as well as the business down the street or the nonprofit organization around the corner. So, but we have to make an affirmative statement that we look at those things. I don't think there's any, based on your financial results, I don't think there's any concern about the city of Fairway. And maybe wanted to mention in that context again that this will look the same for everybody, so to speak. I think I always like to, it works out well right after our opinion is the document that we call management's discussion and analysis. And thanks to Joe for his good hearty work on this. This was put together it's required by our accounting standards body again. but it's a wonderful, I think, condensation of all this information in this 50 plus page document regarding the city's financial results, and it does mention some highlights and so forth. And I think you would see throughout the document the key things I've kind of referred to. This is kind of the reversal of last year. If we were comparing last year's highlights and really not lowlights necessarily, but a pandemic year and no pool, no parks programming, very little capital outlay activity. That's what we were saying last year. Well, guess what? This year, it's when you compare the 2 years together, we have a pool again, good, excellent pool revenues, strong park programming revenues, and we caught up on a lot of capital projects. And so those do show up in the comparative financial information, but it's all for good reasons. And I think, again, Joe did a good job of explaining all that. So but there are two, and for government financial statements, there are two sets of financial statements, two different reporting perspectives. And I mentioned briefly the management discussion analysis talks about those. It explains the differences. Briefly, they're the first ones you see, the first table of numbers, I think starting on about page 10, is really on more of a business-like model. It includes everything. It includes the city's capital assets. Those are police vehicles, public works trucks, but it also includes road, streets, and bridges, sidewalks, and the like, so infrastructure. And it also includes your long-term debt. Basically, you've got your GO bonds that you've used to finance most of those capital assets, a few capital leases, and other really long-term debt. The other item that really sticks out, so to speak, on that net position classification on page 10, we've been recording the pension liability, which is really the city's share of the overall CAPERS liability. And well, there it is up there. It's down at under the liability section, right there towards the bottom. Net pension liability, $1.5 million. This is where I get to point out that you will never liquidate that $1 million. It is a liability for financial reporting purposes. However, you pay CAPERS the required contractual amount every month on your payroll. But the accounting standards setting body decided that, well, I think it goes back a few years. There were, a lot of unfunded governmental pensions, especially ones at high levels like a statewide pension, such as CAPERS. And they were. But so now they decide this is your proportionate share of the liability is how they calculate it. And that number does not appear, so to speak, anywhere in the CAPERS financial accounting. It just says your percent, the percent that you contribute to CAPERS, to the total CAPERS liability, is $1,494,000. OPEB is another one. These are a little more nebulous kind of accounting numbers and concepts that it's other post-employment benefits. Primarily, it's two things. It's the fact because you allow retirees to participate in your city health plan, the accounting rules deem that there's a kind of an implicit subsidy there to those retirees, i.e. a post-retirement benefit. And it's really an actuarial number to determine what the effect of that is. And on this statement here on page 10, this full accrual presentation, it's required to be presented as well. The rest of that statement will look, like I said, other than capital assets, these long-term liabilities, including your bonds, they will look just like your fund statements. And those are ones I think that are probably more meaningful, really, to cities such as Fairway. They align with what Miller Management does, how your monthly accounting is done, and really has a little more of a budgetary perspective, which is really probably the most important management tool from a financial standpoint for you, Nathan, and the city to use. So just another way of saying we have two sets of financial statements. The fund statements appear following these few pages, and those will again look much more traditional like you're seeing. You will see all the different funds, how much cash they have on hand, what kind of payables and other liabilities, and maybe most importantly, their sources of revenue and the expenditures, which are, again, very broad-based, but they're by department, essentially. So that's that, and then following there is following those are the footnotes, and Nathan's going to give by. I'll pause on this statement a little bit, Nathan, if you would, maybe if you're doing 11. This is kind of the full accrual operating statement, and maybe the most important, but the most unique thing to point out is this starts with expenses. Unlike any other income statement, the concept here is to show by department, basically, what your expenses are and how they're paid for. Charges for services, that first column, we're kind of subtracting as we go left to right, saying, general administration generated $564,000 of charges for services. That's license, permits, fees. That helps, that in theory helps pay for their $1,337,000 worth of expenses. We got some grants. As you kind of work your way across, you come to this net expense, format. They're generally always negative. No department fully funds itself, really. We'll give the Parks Department a little credit this year, but a lot of that was due to the contributions for the new Lion Park. So the theory is to say, well, after we've maybe received some grants and or charged users of our services, how much left do we have to cover with general revenues, which are basically your taxes? You can see property sales, franchise, and a few other items there. But so briefly, that's why this statement is unique in the governmental world, that it starts with expenses and ends with revenues, and shows how well you're changing that position is kind of your netting up for the year. So anyway, just wanted to point that out briefly. And I said, following these are the fund statements. Nathan was headed there for a minute, but these will look just like what you're used to. You don't see every fund in here because in our governmental reporting world, the next to last column, other governmental, there's a quantitative test to determine which ones are shown individually. And then there's 4 or 5 funds that are accumulated in the farther back in the audit report or audited statements that make up those other governmental funds, stormwater and the Parks Fund and so forth, that don't meet the quantitative criteria. So, but these will look just very much like what you see, I think, on a monthly basis. And then the next statement there is your revenues and expenses. Well, there's some reconciliations here that kind of explain how we get from funds to this full accrual that I was talking about. But here's a very traditional governmental fund-based statement showing the types of revenues you received, the expenditures by department and by fund. And those, by the way, any of the variances in here are also discussed in that MD&A section. So following this is a lengthy, we've got a number of footnotes. Footnotes are good for those that want to kind of take a little deeper dive into the particulars. It's kind of a little governmental accounting primer here. It starts out explaining the types of statements that's government-wide, or those accrual ones I referred to, some, what's in there, how they're organized, a little bit about presentation, and the accounting method used. And so these significant accounting policy sections really are describing more, like I said, more of a primer. This for governmental accounting rules, and they disclosure rules like these, and they will look very much the same from entity to entity. If you look at your fellow peer, city peers, they will look very, very much like this. Once you get beyond this section, you will start to see things that are much more unique to your city. And they are really providing details about a number of things. Capital assets, it shows, here's a detailed summary and kind of reconciliation of what you bought and disposed of by asset type. One of your very significant numbers on your financial statements. And maybe some of the other key ones will follow. The long-term debt note will show a lot of information about your general obligation bonds and your other sources of debt. You've got the lease purchase agreement that's on the Public Works building and some capital leases for some equipment. Lots of details and kind of history and so forth regarding the long-term debt. As as we go through a little farther, they get a little more esoteric, so to speak. We'll start to getting into some pension notes and things that are very, I would say, actuarially oriented. Now, that's not a bad. There's probably a good one to point out. I know, Mayor, I don't want to take that from you, but it's your debt margin is really very, you've got a significant debt margin in accordance with Kansas statutes. Your limit's 36 million. You've got less than 7, I think. You've got about $28 million debt margin. So the city's kind of debt to the margin ratio is really quite low. So and here comes the pension note. Like I said, there's a lot of this it explains the history, kind of the nature of the pension. Then it also gets very actuarial as we kind of go on through. I sometimes get cynical about our rules, but this used to take up a half a page, and now it takes about 2.5 pages. But the information's there for those that feel compelled to read it, I'll call it. But then we'll start getting into the post-employment benefits, and it explains a little bit about that too. And they're healthcare related, so there's some unique little tables in there and showing the effects of healthcare cost trends and things, which again are more of an actuarial concept. Transfers, risk management's a classic one, just explaining how the city covers its risk management functions by whether you buy commercial insurance, whether you're in a purchasing pool such as Carrot, which you are for workman's comp, very much like your other city peers, and it's an affordable way to do it. SIM is in there because of the agreements. And lastly, the notes. We've got a community improvement district that'll come online here in 2022, or has come online in 2022, and it'll look different next year when we've actually started collecting in sales tax and remitting reimbursements to the developers. So that will expand. We're now into some sections. Here's where you'll find in this section of the audit towards the back, as we work our way back, it's going to be the budgetary comparison for the general fund, some pension statistics there, some post-employment benefit statistics showing how they calculate the costs and the liability. There are two, by the way. I mentioned the city health plan, but Capers also has a insurance plan, and it's been deemed to follow under those same rules. So there'll be 2 sets of those. Some notes of things we're required to disclose on these pensions and OPEBs, whether there were significant changes in actuarial assumptions and the like. And now we're getting back to what I touched on a little bit, or here's where we're seeing the smaller funds here. These we call them non-major funds are being combined, shown on one column on the primary income statement and balance sheet on a fund basis that we looked at earlier. So. And then budgetary comparisons showing that your budgets were in compliance, your budgetary spending was in compliance with Kansas statutes. Positive variances all the way across the board. And that will kind of conclude the audit report. There'll be another document that we issue. We call it's our required communications with the governing body. And that's also a pretty standard document that goes out in every audit, regardless of the type of entity you are. And there'll be some language in there discussing, our review of your accounting policies, whether you have significant journal entries. There's an attachment there. We are required to attach the journal entries, and most cases, and because we do convert your financial statements from kind of your budget basis to this accounting and reporting basis. So a lot of those journal entries were really due to that. Not very many of them were due to significant corrections and so forth. And there's a section in there if we had any disagreements with management over accounting policies and reporting. And of course, we always say we're pleased to say there were none. The help and cooperation we get is very good. We do appreciate the effort of everybody. It is kind of a team effort. We have to be your auditors, but we can't do it without staff's assistance. And we realize it does impose on their regular duties, but we're thankful that everybody does help us out in that regard. And lastly, that we don't have if we had any significant internal control deficiencies and the like, we would be issuing a separate report on that. And we're happy to report we do not have any such a thing to report. So I think that's another positive aspect for the job that the city's done in being cognizant of controls and the needs for checks and balances and keeping them in place. You don't have a large staff, but you've done as well as you can do with the staff levels you had, and the work that Miller Management does also contributes to that. So with that, I said everything went pretty well, and we were always pleased to be able to serve the city. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions or comments anybody has.
Any questions for Jim? Jim, not seeing any. Thank you very much. I am not involved with the audit any longer, so I kind of miss working with you guys. I know everybody thinks I'm nuts, but I like seeing. Welcome
back, Mayor.
Yeah. No, I got plenty to do.
Just say, don't take
the audit looks very good, and
yes,
thank you for mentioning the debt that Fairway has, because that indicates what a strong position we're in.
Yes, it is.
And that's a very, very positive number, so thank you.
Right. I think a lot of your peers, again, would be very happy to have that kind of a debt margin ratio. So.
Yes, they certainly would. Nathan, thank you. I know you squeezed this in with everything else that you have to do, and we appreciate it very much, and thank you to your staff. You'll pass that along.
I will.
Because I know it's an interruption. I mean, and all auditors know that, and they're very. I'm sure Jim's team is very aware of that, and I know you all work well together, so that's excellent. Thank you.
And just a big thank you to Joe as well for his work on the management discussion analysis. He did most of the heavy lifting on that for me, so thank you to Joe for that.
Thank you, Joe, for doing that.
And just for the record, the letter that Jim was referring to was also included as a part of the council packet. It was just before the audit.
Got it. Okay. Thanks again, Jim.
You're quite welcome again. It's always my pleasure to work with everyone at the city. So,
till next year.
Till next year. Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, we do. The council does need to formally accept.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to ask for that. We need a motion to accept the 2021 audit.
I move that we accept the 2021 audit.
Second?
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the 2021 audit. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Great job.
Well, I'll sign off. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item B under new business. Consider ordinance number 1767, an ordinance providing approval for the transfer of telecommunications contract franchise, ordinance number 1340, from Consolidated Communication Enterprise Services, Inc. to Everfast Fiber Networks, LLC. Nathan, is that you?
I can speak to it.
Okay.
It's just a change in ownership of the communication company, so we're just changing the name with the franchise agreement as well. This is pretty standard.
Okay. Is Consolidated Communications going out of business?
They're being purchased.
Are they? Oh, I think I read that in there. That's right, they are. No, we won't get their postcards anymore.
You'll get someone's.
Yeah. All right. Any discussion on the part of council concerning ordinance 1767?
This doesn't preclude them from any additional liability going from a corporation to an LLC.
Rich Cook, City Attorney. An LLC is shielded in liability similarly to a corporation, so it's really a negligible difference.
Any other discussion? All right, then we will vote on, no, I need a motion. Don't have a motion yet.
John Allen Smith, Ward 2, I'd motion that we approve ordinance 1767.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance number 1767. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. And the final item under new business is to consider ordinance number 1768, an ordinance amending the Fairway development ordinances pertaining to driveways, fences, generator pads, and graphics, amending and repealing existing sections 15-297, 15-298, and 15-438 of the Fairway development ordinances. Nathan?
Sure. And again, I wasn't at the PC meeting. I did speak with Kim today, and I know she's listening, so if I screw anything up too badly, she can correct me. But essentially, there are the three things here. The generator pads, the existing code restricted any plane to 43 inches in length with a maximum square footage of 12 feet. What we're seeing are on some of the larger homes, they have bigger generators that exceed that 43 inches in a single plane. So that was, or maybe it's 48 inches, whatever it was. That's been removed now to where it's just the 12 square feet restriction for the pad size. So it doesn't matter on the dimension, they're still restricted to 12 square feet. For the graphics, this was really more of a let's align the code with practice, because on the graphic for driveways, you're allowed to go 20 feet from the garage out. The driveway can be 20 feet wide. And then it goes to 16 feet wide. And what was happening was the code was showing a graphic where it was a hard 90-degree angle. And obviously in practicality, you can't make a 90-degree turn on a driveway with your car. So we've been allowing them to taper it down. So within 10 feet, within 10 feet, they have to be down to a 10-foot width on the driveway. So based on the lot size. So that has been corrected. The graphic now aligns with what we have been approving in practice. And with the fences, this is regarding exceptions for corner lots. And there were, in the code, the language was shall not. And so that then did not allow the Planning Commission to grant an exception. Technically, then it needed to go to BZA for a variance. So that language has been corrected now so that the exception remains within the Planning Commission's purview, and the applicant wouldn't have to seek a variance for installing a fence that doesn't meet code. It's now an exception for Planning Commission. So those were the overall changes that were discussed by the Planning Commission. Staff was supportive of all of those changes. In fact, it was staff that initiated that discussion and obtained the recommendation for approval from the Planning Commission to the governing body. I'm happy to answer any questions or ask.
Great explanation, Nathan. Thank you. I know the Planning Commission and staff have worked very hard on fences, and particularly the corner lots. So I'm glad to see that this is evolving as we live through it. So that's good. Okay, any questions for Nathan or Kim?
I have a question, Mayor.
Jenna?
For Nathan or Kim. So when I was looking through it, it doesn't look like this affects the green space requirements at all. Can you confirm that we're not decreasing green space requirements? Yep. Okay, great.
Jenna, I'm sorry, I did not understand.
Yep. I said when I looked through it, it doesn't look like we're changing the green space requirements. I just wanted to confirm that, and Nathan confirmed.
Okay.
Yeah, because on the plans typically that we were seeing, that taper was there. So that was always being calculated in.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, is there a motion?
David Watkins, Ward 3 Mayor. I move that we approve ordinance number 1768, an ordinance amending the Fairway development ordinances pertaining to driveways, fences, generator pads, and graphics, which amends and repeals existing sections 15-297, 15-298, and 15-438 of the Fairway development ordinances.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance number 1768. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to governing body comment. During this time, members of the governing body will be given the opportunity to speak about matters related to the city, but no formal action will be taken during this time. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring forward?
I have an exciting update. So the Northeast Johnson County cities have banded together to support an environmental fair, and it's coming up next month, September 17th, from 9 to noon at the Powell Community Center. It's a free family-friendly event. There's going to be for-profits, nonprofits with little tables kind of telling you things that you can do in your own home to be more environmentally sustainable. There's an Eco Elvis musical presentation and another Green Spirit band. So hopefully people will want to attend. I know it's going to be on our website soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. And I know you guys have been planning that for some time, so it's here. It's here. It's here. Anything else? Okay. And we have no public comment. As I'm assuming there's still no one on Zoom. Okay, we'll dispense with that part of the agenda. And we are needing to meet in an executive session. And Dan, I believe you have the motion.
I move that the City Council recess into executive session to obtain legal advice related to the intersection of Howe, 57th Terrace, and Reinhardt in Fairway, Kansas, pursuant to attorney-client consultation exception KSA 75-4319B2. The executive session will include Attorney Rich Cook, Attorney Ashley Garrett, Attorney Brian Goldstein, and City Administrator Nathan Nogelmeyer. The open meeting will resume in the City Council chamber at 8:30.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It's unanimous. We will be back in chambers at 8:30.
Mayor, just for the record, this is the last agenda item, and we do not anticipate any action to be taken afterwards. So
That's
we will
correct.
go ahead and cease transmission online for the remainder of the evening.
That's correct. Thank you.